For those of you who don't know me, my name is Siobhan Kelly and I'm the founder of Mosaic Consultancy. I have worked in recruitment for over a decade, so I know I'm aging myself, but sure, look, there it is. I've worked in boutique agencies, I worked in one of the largest agencies, and now I work for myself. And the reason I set up Mosaic was I was really conscious of what the candidate journey would be, and how you could take someone who was like an amazing candidate, but maybe they didn't have confidence, because sometimes that's what the Manager Mind workshop is about. We get in our own way. So that's what I'm able to do at Mosaic, and that's why I'm here and able to do this LinkedIn Live with you. So on average, I would speak to maybe between 12 and 20 candidates per week. And the reason that we came up with the Career Advancement Series was one of the main things stopping somebody from progressing wasn't necessarily their skill set. It was their relationship with themselves. You know, a lot of people were like, oh, well, I don't want to put myself forward for this. Or, you know, when I would ask them about an achievement on their CV, they'd say, well, everybody does it. And it's like, well, not everybody does it, actually. You know, you have to be able to sell yourself. So I remember having this conversation with Ashling, and I was like, we could do a series. And this was off the back of the executive PA forum. And the workshop had gone really well. Now, we had said that we would do maybe online training, but then I confessed to Ashling that I actually didn't believe in online training. And it was more based on what I had done myself, where you'd commit to a course and then even halfway through to week 2, you'd start to realize that maybe you'd bitten off more than you can chew. And then if you did drop out of the course, or the training didn't translate into everyday life, what would happen is you would then use that as a stick to beat yourself with, because that's another thing that you didn't achieve, and it's another thing that maybe you're not potentially good at. But the reason being, when we set a goal and we don't achieve it, it reiterates what the inner critic tells us, which is that we are incapable, that we're incompetent, and that we're potentially not good enough. But it's not that your goal is too lofty or beyond your reach. It's generally that your preparation is just not personalized enough, and that your timeline is generic, and that it's based on outside factors. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with an author named James Clear, but he said, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And one of his examples is, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you have 10 people who are about to run a 100-meter race, their goal at the start line is that everybody wants to win the 100-meter race. So there's nothing wrong with that. But having that goal doesn't mean that you're going to achieve it. What will mean you will achieve it is what you did in the weeks and months before standing at that starting line. So, for example, who ate healthy food, who stayed hydrated, who believed that they were worthy to take the race, who practiced, and who backed themselves. So really, it's the person who stayed loyal to the systems that were tailored to them individually. They're the ones who would achieve the goal. So if you're not achieving certain goals and aspirations, and I learned this the hard way, it's not because the goal is beyond your capability. It is because you need to look at your processes in the run up to that goal. So if you look at 2 individuals who say there's like a 12-month CIPD qualification, okay? The first individual is a mom who works 4-day week, or a full week, 40-hour week, has like 2 kids, maybe has an elderly parent. And then you have somebody else who is maybe in their mid-20s, lives alone, has disposable income. The mom, when she sees that 12-month course, she decides to do it over the 12 months instead of taking the option to do it over 2 years. And the reason she does that is because she's like, well, what will people say, you know, if I do it over 24 months? Or if she didn't have, you know, she was worried that maybe people would think she didn't have the ability to do it in 12 months. So she spreads herself too thin, goes into it. By the second week, she's probably kicking herself, because now this like homework is looming over her. She hasn't studied for her exams. And eventually, in this like hypothetical situation, she could give up. And then she thinks, well, I wasn't good enough. I'm not able for it. The goal was too big for me. But it wasn't the goal. that she was incapable of achieving. It was her processes. If she had given herself more time, if she had said, according to my lifestyle and the capacity that I have, it's better for me to spread this out, and then I can do it in more digestible parts. And she still would have achieved her goal, but it would have been on her timeline. The unfortunate thing about not achieving your goals is this is where your inner critic comes in, okay? And the inner critic gets really loud when we don't achieve something that we've taken a hasty run at. And the unfortunate thing about the inner critic is that there's one for everybody in the audience. We all have one, but they tell us different things. A lot of psychologists say that the inner critic comes from childhood, but it's basically, in a nutshell, and this is like very basic, it's when we internalize external views of ourselves. Okay, so we start to measure our worth and our value by what our family say, our friends say, social media says. And then we compare ourselves to these ideals. But, are you married at a certain age? Do you have a house at a certain age? Do you have a smeg fridge? What school do people go to? And if we're not living up to those ideals, you're a failure. And then that feeds the loop of the inner critic. So one of the easiest ways I can explain this is, have you ever been talking about something with a friend, or maybe a weekend in Cork, and you're around your phone or a new toothpaste or a new foundation or whatever it might be. And then when you go onto your phone, all you see is ads for that specific subject. Well, that's what the inner critic does. It really takes whatever your self-limiting beliefs are, and you may not even know that you have these. So it could be, am I not worthy enough? Am I too big? Am I too old? Any of those things. You're thinking this, you're not recognizing that you're thinking it. And then your inner critic, like Spotify, it really recommends all those hits. So you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? And the oldie but the goodie, you do not belong here. So if you think of your inner critic as a streaming service, what it does is that it reflects your worries about yourself. So the songs that you've been playing, and then it replays it to you tenfold. So I suppose the first question in managing your inner critic is to recognize that they love ambiguity and they ask a lot of questions. So whenever we hear a question in any area of life, it doesn't have to be from your inner critic, that shows that there's a doubt or a lack of knowing, and the inner critic feeds on that. So if you go to your workbook, I just want to make sure that you all have it on page 1. A thumbs up, or we're all good. If you go to page 1, you will see the page which will have the text, can I, am I, will I, or should I? And I want you to take a moment under those headings and write the words that you hear from your inner critic. And this is where the honesty part comes in. You don't need to share it in the comments or anything. This is like private for you. But I suppose the questions that I would have asked myself when I was doing this with an actual therapist was, I suppose, can I set up a business? Am I good enough to do this alone? Is my age a factor? Will I succeed, or will I humiliate myself? So if you write down, you don't have to write like an awful lot, but just like write down maybe 3 or 4 of the inner critic things that you say to yourself, and that are personal to you. And just give me a thumbs up in the comment when you've done it. So just to reiterate, in the first column, it's like, what do you say to yourself when you want to achieve something, or you want to do something that's slightly out of your comfort zone? You really have to sit with yourself. So I don't expect you to get this done in like 30 seconds. Like, you can come back and you can revisit this in your workbook. But is it like your age, your education, your sense of belonging if you're in a corporate environment, your belief in your skill sets? All right, we're good to go on. I see you there. So what you can do is, where you have the other column, when we have the question, can I, you need to switch it. You need to flip it on its head. So instead of saying, can I, or will I, or should I, You say, I can, I will, and I should. And the weird thing is that you will notice more and more now over the coming weeks after doing this workshop that you do ask yourself these questions a lot more than you actually think. So when, like even today, I was like, oh, should I do this LinkedIn Live? Like it might be a disaster. And I was like, no, I should do it. And I am sharing my experiences. And what I've done in that moment is that I've gotten rid of the doubt and I've turned a negative emotion into a positive affirmation. And that is, it gets easier and easier to do because what happens is that you recognize it a lot quicker. Other words that you should look out for that we tell ourselves and we don't realize that we're sowing doubt in our abilities and who we are as people is, and I often did it, would be, well, maybe I'll do this. It's like, no, you won't. Or I'll think about it. You definitely won't, you know, or we'll see. And it's just putting it on the long finger because it's like you don't want to face the emotions of addressing that, you know, you may not be as confident in your skills as you think you are. Now, I want you to go to the second workshop, and that's on page 3. And in the first column, what I would like you to do is write down some of the words that you would use or that a loved one would use to describe you. And someone who cares about you, who knows you, who understands the type of person that you actually are. I think there's space for 10. You don't have to do 10 because I know that we're relatively short on time. So I would say write down maybe 3 or 4 of like somebody who you care about and cares about you and what they would say to describe you. We do cover these types of words like for personal branding and language of luxury in the later webinars, but think of emotive words like trustworthy. You know, would they say you're supportive, you're loving, you're hardworking, you're committed, reliable, any of those words that they would use, and then give me a thumbs up and we can move on to the next one. You don't necessarily have to share these words in the comments because I know sometimes some of you are very hard at taking positive affirmations, so you can write them down and just keep them private. Okay, so when you've done that, I want you in the other column to write down 3 examples of what your inner critic would say. So would that be, again, to do with worthiness, belonging, your skill set, and how you present in the world. So what are those things? Like, you know, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Those kind of things. And you can put that in the other column. I think most of you are done with that. Look at the column of what the people who love you say, and then look at the column of what your inner critic would use. So when you're listening to your inner critic on your Spotify loop, it's not the kind words that you repeat to yourself. It's not, well, you know, you're too generous with your time, so that's why you didn't get a pay rise, or you're too innovative to get that promotion. It goes back to that self-fulfilling prophecy that you're not good enough, you know, you don't belong. And if you think about it, think how often you reinforce that negativity throughout the day. When do you celebrate yourself? Or how many times in a day would you say to a colleague or a friend, I'm actually really good at that? Or when I come off of the LinkedIn Live, will I say, do you know what, I was amazing, I was a really good presenter? Or will I say, oh, I stuttered? Or, you know, so that's all your inner critic at work. But there is good news. I promised you I would get to some good news. There's multiple ways to manage the inner critic. And it really is about finding the best way for you to do it. But this is what's worked for me. Okay, so the first is to become aware it's even a thing. So congratulations, you're on this webinar. So you know that the inner critic is a huge thing, and it's been around since the start of time. Like really what it is, it's there to protect you and keep you safe and keep you away from used to be dangerous situations. Secondly is recognizing the common themes that you tell yourself. And they all vary. There's a lot of common threads between different individuals or demographics of women, men, underrepresented minorities. But it can be anything from your education, your profession, your body size, your social status, whether you're married, you're not married, any of those things. And third, and this was like life-changing for me, is that feeling isn't fact. Okay, so feeling is not fact. When your inner critic starts to get loud, like mine did before the LinkedIn Live, you hear it, you hear the negativity, and what that does is that causes a chain reaction, and it causes what I would call like an anxiety loop. So you have the thought, and then it manifests physically in your body. So if you were going to go speak at a meeting, and you have a fear of public speaking, but as the day approaches, the inner critic, as they do, gets louder, and you start to develop stomach aches or dry mouth. That happens to me all the time, or a headache, or you're lightheaded, or there's a huge change in your appetite. The anxious loop starts, and then you start to go down a rabbit hole of catastrophizing all the things that could actually happen in this 5-minute talk. So you think, what if I faint? What if I stutter? What if I completely forget what I wanted to talk about? What if, right? So you're gone down a rabbit hole, and then the anxiety thoughts are going 100 miles an hour. So the inner critic is amazing at getting us stuck in that loop, and it ends the loop. Well, I know it definitely did for me. The inner critic ends the loop at the absolutely worst moment of your fear, okay? And then you just go back to the start, and then you relive it, and you relive it, and you relive it, to the point then that you withdraw, or you don't want to do it, or it's just not worth the outcome because you've been so sick with anxiety in the run up to it. So, as I said, feeling is not fact. To counteract your inner critic, which thrives, I suppose, on emotion and panic and uncertainty, is that you fight it with logic. You use the think, ink, and link method. So with think, you identify the thought or the fear or the limiting self-belief that keeps you small and keeps you in your comfort zone. Okay, so when you've identified, and you could have multiple of these at the same time. So when you identify it, then you ink it. And that means that you write it down. And you can do it in bullet points. I don't mean that you have to write a thesis, but you're like, well, why am I worried? You know, what is it about this that's actually making me nervous? And you answer the question that the critic is asking. So like, as I gave in the example before, the public speaking. So what if I faint? Well, someone will pick me up, right? Worst case scenario, somebody will pick me up. What if I forget about what I'm talking about? Well, you have a copy of your notes. You're going to say, I have it on the PC and laptop. I have handouts. So that's covered, and somebody will remind me. What if I stutter? Well, of course you're going to stutter. Everyone stutters, and no one cares. They're just happy they're not standing up there giving the talk. And then with the link part of this, you find the facts. The situation will end where and how you dictate it will. And by using the think, ink, and link method, all you're doing is reassuring yourself that if something happens and if something goes wrong, as it generally does, you know, not everything goes to plan, you have the capability to handle it. So in your workbook, if you turn to the Think, Ink, Link page, I want you to write down. So think of a fear or something that you'd like to do, but you tell yourself reasons why you can't. And you kind of explain it away. So if you write down a fear, that's in the think part. The second part will be write 2 points of why the inner critic tells you that you can't do it. You know, are you not good enough? You're not an expert on the topic. Whatever that might be, related to that fear and why you keep yourself small. And at the end of this exercise, after you've done the think, so you've written your fear, why you want to do something, and what's stopping you from doing it, a couple of words to say what the inner critic is telling you to keep you small. And then I always find comfort in the worst case scenario because sometimes the worst case scenario does happen. So follow that thought process, or land the plane like, okay, well, what is the worst case thing that could happen if you decided to go back to college, or if you decided to put your hand up for a project, or whatever it might be. Write down the worst case scenario. And even for after this workshop, you'll be able to then say, well, if that happens, worst case scenario, this is how I can manage it. And this is how I can counteract it. I'll give you a couple of seconds to finish that or to write some notes. Are we good to go? There's a lot of work there, but I'm conscious that I want to get through this for you, and then you can the plan is that if you want to do the workbook as well, and you can put more detail into the workbook and expand on what we've spoken about and talked about today, that if you sign up to the Career Advancement Series, we'll be doing a Zoom next week, and I can run through your individual workbooks with you and address it in kind of a more specific format. It's strange for me to be sitting here and not be able to see all your smiling faces. Okay, all right, so I'm going to continue. I suppose in relation to the inner critic, we never fully get rid of it, and we shouldn't. As I said, it really is designed to keep you safe and keep you away from harm. But I think the difference between those who succeed in achieving their goals and their aspirations and those who don't succeed is they make peace with their critic. So by trying to silence or ignore the internal dialogue that we have, and think about it, you're the only person that you're going to be with every day of the week, every hour of the day, for the rest of your life. So you have to be really conscious about how you speak to yourself. And when we try and silence it or bury it down, like nothing good ever happens when that happens. But what you do is that you spend a lot of your capacity, so your time, your energy, and your passion on an internal psychological warfare almost. With the inner critic, like early humans, they develop like a fight or flight response. Maybe there was a dinosaur or whatever it might be. We don't have that now. We get it from an email, but it's an automatic response to danger. And your fight or flight allows you to react quickly, and it obviously aids in survival. So the amygdala, this is the science part, is the part of the brain that controls this reaction. So when you feel stressed or afraid, the amygdala releases like a stress hormone that will prepare your body to fight the threat or flee the danger. Now, as I said, it used to be because of, attacks, or you're living in a cave or whatever it might be. Now it's like you have a toxic boss, or you have a deadline, or you get an email where they don't say, "Hi, Siobhan," they just say, "Siobhan," and my fight or flight goes through the roof. And it's common that this is triggered, I suppose, from fear, from anxiety, or from perceived acts of aggression. So when you have a physical reaction to your inner critic, so when the anxiety starts to work through your body, that's your amygdala. And my tool was to befriend it. And I know this sounds weird. I actually said this at an event before, and there was laughter, but my amygdala now goes by the name of Amy. And let me tell you, she was in high dough this morning. And I had to tell Amy to shush, a few times, because she was afraid that I was going to make a holy show of myself on this LinkedIn Live. And I had to tell her that we were going to do this either way, and to get on board. And here we are. And I think if you remember, with your inner critic or your amygdala, it's a protection mechanism. And with this protection mechanism, what it does is that it can keep you safe, but it keeps you small. So by befriending it and realizing, okay, no, it's like a worried best mate. Maybe you shouldn't do that. It's like, sure. Like, it's like you're having a conversation with them as opposed to outright warfare. So we're almost at the end of this session. And I don't know, sometimes like I share too many personal things or personal stories in these training things, but I suppose it's important that that like this is actually work that I've done on myself with professionals, and it's important. It's not just like another LinkedIn Live. It's like things that I actually think about in real life. And I suppose I started focusing on my mind properly about 3 years ago, I had to. So there was like 6 months of just like, just like keeping my head above water. But then like 2 years ago, it started to become more of a project of self-care and discovery. And so 2 years ago also coincided with the birth of my newest goddaughter, Matilda. And she is as bold as her name indicates. But I remember one day looking at Matilda as she lay in her playmat, and I thought, I love her. I would do anything for her, anything. I'd protect her till the ends of the earth, and she's sunshine to me. But with that said, in relation to Matilda, she doesn't do much. Like, she ate, she did what babies do, she burped, she slept when she wanted to. She didn't contribute to conversations. She doesn't. She generally interrupts them. She didn't help her parents sleep well. She disrupted that. And the thing is that given all that, she was and is loved just as she is. She's enough. Like, Matilda has tremendous value, and her presence is a gift. And it goes without saying that at one stage we were all like Matilda. And it got me thinking, like, at what stage does Matilda being Matilda stop being enough? When will society teach her that she needs to start showing return on investment? Should be brainwashed like we are to think that you need to be doing or reaching or achieving or owning or earning just to be acceptable, just to do the bare minimum. Goals and achievements and promotions are simply sprinkles on an ice cream. And time doesn't equate importance. So just because you spend more time working than doing anything else doesn't mean that it is more important or that is where you derive your value. You are not your job or your education, or your levels of body fat. That is not you. You are the ice cream, and you are enough as you are. And it's important to remember that, because it's very easy to blur the line between professional and personal. I did it. And when I lost my job, I was crippled because I assigned all my worth to what I did from 8 till 6:30, Monday to Friday, and sometimes weekends. And the gift that I got, the strangling, I think somebody had said to me, I needed to strangle the good out of the situation. The good I got, that is, if the LinkedIn lives go away, if the podcast goes away, if Mosaic goes away, I'm still the ice cream, and so are you. So I wanted to end on that, but we do have one more exercise. And if you go to the last page of your workbook, please, you will see a big circle. Okay, so this is all about work-life balance, which is the same as a unicorn. I think it's very, very hard to manage it. But if you look at all the different columns that are there, okay, you are not going to be a 10 out of 10 on all of them at exactly the same time. If you're doing really well in your social life, your work will suffer. If you're doing really great in work, your relationships will suffer. The reason that you use this wheel is because what's an acceptable level? Would you rather be a strong 7 across the board, or a 10 at work, but then you have to give up something else? And this is something that's very, very personal to you. And I remember hearing this quote that said, you can do anything, but not everything. So, and I've learned this the hard way, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And you only have a certain amount of capacity. So, not to finish on a cliche, but no is a full sentence. If you can't do something, or if it's not for you, it's okay just to say, no, it's not for me. Because if you say yes to it, you're taking time away from the things that are important. So whether that's your family, your friends, your self-care time. Thank you so much.
The next one, which is career advancement styles, and that focusing on kind of how you operate in your working world, things that you do to, are you looked over for promotion?
Yeah. There's so
then
many things with it. I think the thing with the
yeah.
career advancement series, it's the same as the inner critic. Like, everyone has one, and
Mm,
you're just not aware of it. And what I'm conscious of is with the career advancement series is this isn't about changing companies. So this isn't me as a recruiter saying, okay, and then I'll place you somewhere else. The career advancement series is like, even if you want a promotion, like it's or your career advancement style, if you have an annual review, and if you go in, I remember I used to go in and ask for a review, like, and ask for things, and it would be no. And I go, okay. I'd nearly come out of the review owing them money. And it was just, I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And I also went through life with like a degree of gratefulness. Well, sure, look, I'm just happy to be here. Thanks a million. Like you're very good. Not thinking that I just did a 60-hour week or built like 400K for the company. Like and sometimes it just takes somebody else to say to you, it's okay to ask this question. But the important thing I think is that you remember that wherever you fall, specifically in the career advancement series, it's not a negative. It's just because you could sit there and go, well, actually, I'm really happy with where I am. But if you don't know the type of style you have, then you can't fix it in case you want that promotion or you want to put your hand up for to work on different projects. It's the same as personal brand, like a phrase I absolutely hate, you know, but
mm,
it's more about your professional reputation, in the sense of if whether you post on LinkedIn, you don't have to be like an influencer or anything like that, but whether you post on LinkedIn or like you need to share, you need to add value, and that's what your professional brand does. It's just sharing what you're interested in, your industry knowledge, things like that, like, and especially specifically with executive assistants, and sometimes like more junior finance, audit, or accountancy staff. It's like they just feel that, well, they're not in the place to let senior people know what they do, or sometimes their work is taken, other people take credit for their work. So there's lots of things that you can learn that's non-confrontational, but it's also like it makes you more of a high agency person, that like you have more control over your promotions, your salary, what you get. I mean, like, even if you ask for a salary raise and they're like, well, um, you can negotiate a timeline. Whereas when I was doing it, I was just like, oh, sure, like, grand, okay, talk to you this time next year. Not like, well, let's circle back in a month, or what do I need to achieve, or can you put it in writing a plan? So I think that
yeah, and they're just little tweaks. It's not to be going like rubbing shoulders with like the big,
no, with the
you know.
Bezos of the world, no, no,
Yeah, it's more about like little tweaks, making sure that just what you do, what you work so hard at every day is getting acknowledged, but not in a,
yeah,
not in an overpowering way. Just
no.
little tweaks. So that's career advancement styles. That's the next one. And
Sorry,
then
just before you
following
move
that,
on to that. Sorry, just before you move on
yeah.
to that. And this is about the whole series. All of this is about being authentic. So
Mm,
confidence looks different on me than it will on somebody else or on you, and the way you speak to somebody will be different. So this isn't about like, us finding one voice and we all go in like with a Conor McGregor swagger saying, this is what I want. That's not what you're going to learn from this series. It's about finding your own voice and communicating in a way that feels authentic to you and something that you're comfortable about. And that's where your intrinsic value comes from. It's like, you're enough. The way you say it is enough. We just give
mhm.
you the tools that you can adapt to suit yourself.
And then following on from that, there's career mapping.
Yeah,
So
that's my
again,
favorite.
it's yeah, your holiday destination
Yeah, yeah,
analogy. I love that. So career mapping, and again, it's not about moving jobs or anything. It's just about acknowledging like what it is that you want and where you want to go, and that everything that you're doing is moving in that direction.
yeah.
Then after that, there's the language of luxury.
Yeah, that's well, actually, that's I was going to say that's they're all my favorites. But the language of luxury I love because that can actually add, like, I've seen it add like maybe 5-10K to somebody's like salary offer,
Yeah.
purely because it's like, if you think of your CV, and this ties in with your personal branding, that's why it's a series. But it's
Hmm.
that, how are you like, now I shop in little, so this is no judgment, but are you like a Lidl or a Little brand, or are you like Gucci? And when you're describing yourself, like you're using the language of luxury, like it's an emotive language. So it's like, how do you cause people to go, oh my God, like that sounds phenomenal? Because it is an advertising document and people will respond to it. So you'll get what they perceive your value to be. And yeah, so using that can kind of, increase your chance of interviews and promotions. And then again, if you're staying internally in the company that you're in, but you're looking for an internal promotion, you can use that on your business case.
Yeah, even just your end of year review.
Mm-hmm.
How, when you're asked the question, maybe of, how do you think you're doing? What do you think you're bringing?
Yeah, that's always a hard question for people to ask.
Yeah, I know. Those appraisals, end of year review.
Yeah, it's a box ticking exercise.
But I know from going through it with you, from going through all of it and the workbook as well, it's like, oh no, there's a way to do it, to get comfortable with it, to be comfortable, confident.
And to be honest with you, the majority of managers, like I know with managers that I've had, like they come in, they've a few to do. Like it's good for you to come in and be like, okay, so this is what I'm looking for, and work back from it. And they say, well, I don't know if I can do this, I can do this. So it's a negotiation. You're working with the person, not against them. And yeah, so it's more that, like, it's like you're saying, well, this is what I need, and how do I get there? If you're not giving it to me today, then when? And it's like it's a conversation as opposed to like, a hostage demand.
Yeah, and again, once you've done the career advancement style and career mapping, you're going in with even more of a certain framework.
Yeah.
And then it'll be how you communicate that.
Well, the whole thing is as well is that it's like about controlling your narrative and managing your own story. And if you go into something nervous or unsure or not with the vocabulary to describe what you do and the impact it had, not just on the person you're speaking to, but the team or the wider company, if you don't say that with confidence and you don't deliver that with confidence, they're not going to be confident. So once you get it right, again, in your own mind, that it's like, well, what's kind of stopping me from saying I'm actually phenomenal, or I, freed up your leadership time to do this with strategy, and the output on this was like, because you don't want to be the big I am. You're on your own in that room, whether it's an interview, a promotion, a review, selling yourself. So I think it's just, once you see these workbooks and you work through what's stopping you, you find the language then that's easier for you to communicate your value and your worth. And then when you say it in your authentic way, and you're not trying to be like, a character off Billions or Wolf of Wall Street, it comes across like a lot more honest and a lot more, I think, respected.
Yeah, and you've already silenced, once you've battled the inner critic.
Yeah, Amy's quiet.
Kept Amy out of the room. Just keep Amy out of the room.
Amy's in the canteen eating biscuits. Where I will be.
And then the personal branding, which you touched on.
Yeah.
And I think when we revisited it, there was so much in terms of your personal brand, like online and in work, and then your personal brand personal. So we've split those into part 1 and part 2.
Part 2, yeah. Like you could be doing this for years,
Yeah.
Like it is a body of work with it. But I do think that, like, irrespective of your industry or what you do, and it's also, I think it takes the onus off employers, which is really important, like with HR teams and things, like, because you'll have people going, well, what can I do, or how do I put myself forward? And this is like you taking back that agency and saying, okay, well, I want to do that. Like, my manager is not a mind reader. So when I go in saying nothing about promotions, pay rises, anything like that, and then I just say to them at the end of year review, and they're like, so like, I think this gives the employee, I suppose, the power and the direction to say, I want to communicate what I want. And then the employer can say, okay, well, this is how we can facilitate it, or do you have some ideas to do it? And it just starts a dialogue, because then, and that also helps employers retain staff, because they feel that they're being listened to and that their work and things is being appreciated, which is great.
And so then just for anybody who maybe came on a little bit later, how we've decided to actually, the format of how the series will go. So we've decided, like, on a Monday, you get the workbook for that week and a recording training from Siobhan to guide you through the workbook and the exercises, with lots of fantastic anecdotes to go with, which are just brilliant. And then on the Friday, the Thursday or Friday, a live, a Zoom call live with a group, with all of you, if with whoever signs up and registers. And I think that is where, you know, you can like finish the workbook, ask the questions, like, you know, you'll be there.
Well, I think the thing is that, like, it's a lot of information. And as I said at the start, like, I feel like that sometimes these like online trainings don't work. And it is purely because it's like, I'm going to spit this information at you, you're going to do the workbook, and now we're going to move on to the next subject. Whereas, like, it's important, I think, like, like, I like doing the LinkedIn Live, but I want to be able to see, like, for me, this is human connection. So I want to be able to see people. And if you have a query, you don't have to share like the personal stuff, but like, you know, how would I answer that I can actually guide you through it, or give you an example, or you can learn from somebody else in the group that will contribute something. Because like a lot of people will have the same or similar questions.
Even just working on it with you. And
I know last night there was a few kind of nuggets dropped, wasn't there?
So many nuggets. So true. And just like all of the tools and techniques are very much for anybody at any point in their career, even their life.
I know.
Well,
it had really helped me. So this isn't me just like, you know, Googling it. You know this yourself, that I know when I was even going through a hard time that like my situation didn't change. Like if anything, it actually got progressively worse. But because I had been able to manage my mind, it was lighter. It was a different process.
But I do think the workbook is a great thing,
because
even for the rest of the webinars, you'll want to be able to come away with like a folder that you can just
and you can see your progress that way as well. But I think as well, because we sent them out this morning, we were actually still doing like finishing touches last night because we wanted to get so much in, which we did. And then the workbook with this series, if you don't have it completely finished, the workbook by the Friday, say for the Manage Your Mind one, that's okay, because this is a process for you to be writing notes and things. The workbook is just a guideline. So it's not like if you don't have everything filled in and have your 10 examples, that you don't get to go on to the next one. The only reason we do the Zoom call is to make sure that we've clarified any single point that's been made, that you have like got it straight in your head about the inner critic, fighting with it, how to subdue it, manage it, identify it, all of those things. And then we move on to the next. But this will be an evolution, because how I felt about like the inner critic at the start, or personal branding, the more you learn about it, the more, and I had said this to Aisling only last night, that your mind broadens, and then you pick up more from it, and you start to like recognize, you know, this about wellness or self-care, and it's just a kickstart like your journey. So it's whether it's professional and then also like personal as well, like it gives you, I think, a stronger grounding.